Number 19 on my fantasy playlist of October the 17th, 1992, NXS from Australia with Not Enough Time, a lost 45. It would be their last top 40 hit. They lost a lot of momentum in the early 90s, but the album that this song came off of, Welcome to Wherever You Are, it got a 4-star rating from Q Magazine, a prestigious music mag. They said this was something like this was one of the most heartfelt albums they ever did, and there's considerable warmth and sincerity and Not Enough Time. The song I'm going to play for you by NXS. NXS formed back in 1977. The first song I heard by NXS, I fell in love with it. My goodness, it was The One Thing. Back in the winter and spring of 1983. That barely cracked the top 40. Well, actually it went to number 30, but a lot of the top 40 stations would not play it. It was just a new band, and they're not going to take a chance on a new band. You know how these top 40 stations are. But they came out with some minor hits after that. One of them was called, Original Sin. That, if you're an NXS fan, you probably remember that one. And I Send a Message. Remember that one? Summer of 1984. That went to number 77 on Billboard's Hot 100, but Night Tracks on WTBS, they played the hell out of the video. This, again, back in the summer of 84, that's 30 years ago. My goodness. And then they broke it to the top 10. They finally did it. 2 years later in 1986, What You Need, and then they released the album Kick. And it kicked ass. This was probably their most commercially successful, probably their most commercial album. Never Tear Us Apart, New Sensation, Devil Inside, Need You Tonight, top 10s. Just one top 10 after another from late 1987 going into the fall of 1988. This was a big album for NXS. But then, 1990, they came back with the scintillating Suicide Blonde, the desperation and the frustration, and Michael Hutchins' voice as he plows right through the song, heard on that lovely melody, that rock and roll melody. And then Disappear, one of my favorite songs by NXS. Disappear almost had an ethereal, atmospheric feel to it, particularly, well, I won't get into that, but that was in late 1990, early 91. I think that was a top 10, and that would be their last top 10. The song I'm going to play for you went to number 28 on Billboard's Hot 100. Now here's the thing about this album. You got to understand, by the early 90s, grunge was getting real big. I mean, 1991, 92, when they were working on this album, when this album came out, grunge was catching up big time. Now, the word was about Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Nirvana. And they tried for a different sound. NXS did. They incorporated a 60-piece orchestra. They went for a more raw sound. It's not so obvious, the raw sound of Not Enough Time, but there's another song off the album, Heaven Sent, that they put out as a single. That was raw. That was rock and roll. That was even more rock and roll than New Sensation. It was they just sprang it on out. And I guess that's all I got to say about this song, Not Enough Time. It is sad about Michael Hutchins, though, that he was found dead in a hotel room in Sydney, 1997 rather, and it was ruled a suicide. His death was. Michael Hutchins, never forget Michael Hutchins. NXS put out some good rock and roll records. There are some people who think, with reason, that NXS was probably one of the most underrated bands of the 80s and early 90s. Here's Not Enough Time by NXS at number 19.